I was sitting on my sofa watching a quiet documentary when my son-in-law stormed into the room and ripped the cable out of the TV. Enough, we don't watch this garbage in this house. But what hurt more than his words wasn't his voice, it was the image of my daughter standing behind him. After 18 months living under my roof, she didn't step forward, didn't dare look me in the eye, just nodded, agreeing with him. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I went upstairs. That night, I made a decision with just one phone call. And by the next morning, everything had begun moving toward the point of no return. Thank you so much for staying here with me. Before we continue, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? I love seeing how far this story reaches and reading every single comment. Just a quick note before we move on. This story includes a few fictionalized elements added for storytelling and learning purposes. Any similarity to names or settings is coincidental, but the message behind it is meant to offer perspective and insight. The black cable dangling from the wall marked the moment my patience finally ran out and the moment everything began to change. It was October 2025, a Friday afternoon that should have been ordinary, calm, forgettable, until it wasn't. My name is Frank Coleman. I'm 67 years old, a retired investigative journalist, and according to the deed locked away in my filing cabinet, I am the sole owner of this house, though nothing about the way I'd been living reflected that fact. Somewhere along the way, I had become invisible in my own home, present but disregarded, heard but ignored, reduced to something people maneuvered around on their way to things that mattered more. My wife, Catherine, had been gone for 5 years. When she passed, the warmth went with her, the laughter, the feeling that this place belonged to us. 18 months ago, my daughter Nicole moved back in with her husband Brandon after they lost their apartment. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door without conditions because that's what fathers do. We protect our children even when they're grown, even when the men they marry set off alarms we choose to ignore. That afternoon, I was sitting in my leather recliner, the one Catherine and I bought in 1998, watching a documentary about World War II, battles in the Pacific. Autumn sunlight filtered through the windows, casting the room in a soft gold glow. The narrator was explaining the Battle of Guadalcanal when I heard footsteps approaching. Not light footsteps, not hesitate ones. Brandon's, heavy, purposeful, the kind that announce authority before the person ever speaks. He appeared in the doorway around 4:30, filling the frame like a brewing storm. Brandon Chambers, 40 years old. Supposedly a real estate agent, though, I'd yet to see proof of an actual sale. He wore one of his tailored shirts, likely worth more than what I spent on groceries in a week. "This is enough," he said flatly. "I'm tired of this garbage." I looked up from the screen. "I'm sorry. This nonsense you watch all day." He waved at the television like it offended him personally. "It lowers the intellectual tone of the house. We need higher standards around here." He called me Frank, not Dad, not Mr. Coleman, just Frank, like he owned the place, like he had the right. "It's a documentary," I said, keeping my voice steady. Decades in journalism had taught me control, educational content. It's just old men talking about old wars. He crossed the room in a few long steps. "We're trying to create a more refined environment, something modern." I should have recognized the look in his eyes, that familiar mix of arrogance and contempt I'd seen countless times in people I'd exposed during my career. But this was my home. I didn't expect to need armor here. Without warning, Brandon reached behind the television and ripped the cable from the wall. One sharp yank. The plastic snapped. The screen flickered to static, then went black. The narrator's voice mid-sentence about sacrifice was cut off instantly like a life abruptly ended. "There," he said, holding the broken cable up like a prize. "Much better. Now maybe you can do something productive instead of wasting your time." I didn't move. The remote sat useless in my hand, aimed at a screen that no longer responded. "We'll talk about better entertainment choices over dinner," he added as he walked away. "Nicole and I have ideas about bringing this house into the present." At 6:15, the front door opened. I recognized the sound of my daughter's car, then her steps on the porch, slow-tired, careful. She'd spent the day on her feet at the hospital. Nicole was a nurse, a dedicated one. I heard her bag hit the floor, her greeting to Brandon, his low voice no doubt framing himself as the reasonable one. She entered the living room a few minutes later, still wearing her scrubs. "Hey, Dad." The words sounded practiced, automatic. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Her eyes moved from the dark screen to the broken cable on the table, then to me. I waited, for a question, for concern, for defense, for any trace of the girl who once stood up to bullies on the playground. Instead, she sighed. "Dad, she said, disappointment heavy in her tone. Mom would hate how you spend your time. Brandon's right. The energy in this house needs to change. We all need to improve. And with that, she turned away. No explanation, no discussion, just acceptance. I stayed in that chair as daylight faded into evening. Streetlights flickered on. I sat there holding the broken cable, the jagged plastic pressing into my palm. Dinner came and went. The house filled with the sounds of them cooking together, laughing at their phones, moving freely through rooms I'd paid for, as if I'd already been erased. I looked at the cable again, lifeless, useless. Then I looked at the walls Catherine and I had painted, the floors we refinished, the windows we chose together, and something shifted. A quiet click inside my chest, like a door unlocking, like something long dormant finally waking up. For over 40 years, I had been an investigative journalist. I'd taken down corrupt officials, fraudulent executives, and smooth-talking predators who believed they were untouchable. I'd built my career on patience, on observation, on knowing when silence was strategy and when it was surrender. For 18 months I had been silent, watching Brandon claim my home, watching my daughter drift away, watching myself shrink under 1,000 small humiliations. That phase was over. I stood slowly, joints aching, but steady. I walked to the bedroom they hadn't taken and opened my desk drawer. Inside was a yellow legal pad, the same kind I'd used for every investigation of my life. At the top of the page I wrote, October 18th, 2025, the cable. Then I started writing everything I'd ignored, the unfamiliar charges on my credit card, the hushed phone calls, the way Brandon's eyes lingered on my possessions, always calculating. The reckoning had begun. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cable falling, heard Nicole's voice defending him. By 11 o'clock, I stopped pretending rest was possible. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe and settle until a thought cut through the fog with brutal clarity: stop being a victim. Start being a journalist. The shift felt physical, like flipping a switch that had been untouched for years, maybe longer. Maybe since Catherine died and grief softened me, made me passive grateful for scraps of attention from my daughter. Somewhere along the way, I'd traded self-respect for proximity. Tonight that ended. At 11:30, voices drifted through the wall. Brandon and Nicole's bedroom shared it with mine, an arrangement that felt more invasive each day. I couldn't hear words, only the low cadence of his voice and her occasional replies. They were planning something, probably about me, probably how to manage the old man now that lines had been drawn. Let them talk. While they planned, I'd move. At midnight, I decided. I slipped from bed, pulled on the flannel robe Catherine gave me our last Christmas, and moved into the hallway in socked feet. The house was dark except for the thin bar of light beneath their door. I paused, listening. Silence. Either asleep or occupied in ways I refused to imagine. I moved like I hadn't in years, slow and deliberate, rediscovering instincts forged on stakeouts and late-night investigations. Weight balanced, floorboards memorized, patience overriding urgency. Funny how the body remembers. My old study now, Brandon's office sat at the end of the hall. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? In Brandon's world, I was harmless. A pensioner who watched television and complained quietly. Someone you could sideline while absorbing his life, his home, his authority. I turned the handle at 1 a.m. The room no longer smelled like books and polish. It stank of cologne and energy drinks. My desk was buried under fast food wrappers and scattered papers, and there, faintly glowing in sleep mode, sat his laptop. I sat in my chair and touched the trackpad. The screen lit instantly. No password, no hesitation. I almost laughed. For 42 years, I'd been an investigative journalist. I'd exposed corruption, fraud, and men who mistook power for immunity. I'd done it with discipline and evidence. And here sat Brandon Chambers, convinced I was too broken to notice anything. How had I missed it? Grief, loneliness, fear of losing my daughter. I'd swallowed indignities to keep family close. I'd paid with my dignity. That debt came due tonight. I began with browser history, luxury brands, restaurants I couldn't afford, then email, everything logged in, banking apps, texts synced. The arrogance was staggering. I took out my phone and photographed everything methodically. My hands were steady. This wasn't anger. It was clarity, muscle memory. At 2 a.m, I found the credit card statements. My credit card. The one I hadn't used in months. The one meant for emergencies buried in my wallet. According to these statements, I'd been living extravagantly. $900 dinners, $3,000 shopping sprees, spa charges labeled luxury wellness, electronics I'd never seen, A weekend resort bill I couldn't pronounce. The charges spanned 6 months, statement after statement, each signature close to mine, but wrong. Close enough for a glance. Not close enough to fool a man who'd signed his name for 67 years. $47,000. In half a year, my son-in-law had stolen $47,000, and he'd documented it all. I photographed every page, every forged signature, every absurd charge. 43 images in total, 43 quiet clicks sealing his fate. At 2:20, my blood iced. A door opened. Footsteps. Brandon heading to the bathroom. I closed everything, returned the desktop exactly as I found it, eased the laptop into sleep mode. The footsteps approached. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. The bathroom door shut. Water ran. I slipped into the hall and back to my room, moving fast but silent. Behind me, the bathroom door opened again. Brandon padded past. I closed my door and sat on the bed at 2:30, phone-clenched adrenaline finally catching up. I waited until I was certain he'd gone back to sleep. My hands shook now, but the evidence was safe. The fraud wasn't the worst thing on that laptop. I'd glimpsed emails with subject lines that turned my stomach. Those would wait. I'd risked enough. I scrolled through the photos once more. Clear, legible, damning. For decades I'd chased truth. Tonight the truth had come to me. I should have slept. The credit card evidence was enough. But at 2:30 in the morning, sitting on my bed with my phone, my thumb kept scrolling through the photographs. That's when I saw it, an email thread I'd captured almost by accident. Subject line, Re Frank Coleman, long-term care options. My stomach dropped. I enlarged the image. The exchange was between Brandon and someone named Susan Whitfield, senior living consultant at Sunrise Meadows Memory Care Facility. Memory care. They thought I needed memory care. The first email was dated August 15th, 3 months ago. Brandon's message was brief. Hi, Susan. Thanks for taking my call yesterday. I'm looking into options for placing an elderly relative. He's becoming increasingly difficult to manage at home. What's the process for admission? Elderly relative. Difficult to manage. As if I was a problem to be solved rather than the man who owned the house he was living in. Susan's response came 3 days later, professional and sympathetic. We understand how challenging it can be when a family member shows signs of cognitive decline. Our facilities require documented evidence of such decline, as well as family consensus regarding professional care. We need medical assessments, proof of inability to maintain independent living, and either the patient's consent or legal power of attorney. I was 67 and sharper than I had been at 40, but Brandon was building a case that I was losing my mind. The September 10th email made my hands shake. Brandon wrote, "The old man is stubborn but showing signs. Confusion about dates, repeating himself, occasional disorientation. My wife agrees he needs professional care. We're both concerned about his safety. What documentation would you need from us?" Lies. Every word was lies. I'd never been confused or disoriented. This was pure fabrication to justify warehousing me while he sold my house. And he claimed Nicole agreed. My daughter, who'd promised at her mother's funeral to always take care of me, had apparently signed off on having me declared incompetent. Unless he was lying about that too. Susan's response outlined the roadmap physician's assessment, documenting cognitive decline, power of attorney established, while the patient was still competent enough to sign. Then admission paperwork. Brandon had been laying groundwork, probably shopping for a doctor willing to diagnose decline in a healthy man, drafting power of attorney documents for me to sign without reading carefully. The final email dated September 28th was the most damning. Brandon wrote, "Attached is the brochure and preliminary application with his information. Once Frank is placed in your care and power of attorney transfers, the house can be sold within 90 days. Property value around $800,000. After facility costs are deducted, that should leave a substantial amount for managing his ongoing care. $800,000. My house, the one Catherine and I bought in '83 for $62,000. The house we'd painted together, where we'd raised Nicole, where we'd built our life. To Brandon, it was just an asset to liquidate, and I was just an obstacle to remove." I zoomed in on the attached PDF, an application form for Sunrise Meadows, with my full name typed at the top, Frank Robert Coleman, date of birth, social security number, all filled in without my knowledge or consent. I looked at Catherine's photo on my nightstand, our 30th anniversary a year before cancer. She was laughing, eyes bright. "Kate," I whispered, "I wish you were here. You always knew when I was being too soft, too trusting. But she was gone, and I was alone with this mess. I'd let grief and loneliness override my judgment. Let Brandon into my home because I couldn't bear separation from Nicole. I connected my phone to my laptop at 2:45, created a folder, Evidence J. Chambers, started copying files, phoned a hard drive to USB drive. Redundancy, multiple backups, every journalist's first lesson. By 3 o'clock, I had 3 complete copies, 47,000 in fraud, a conspiracy to declare me incompetent and institutionalized, a plan to sell my home while I lived out my years in a facility I'd never agreed to. I held the USB drive, smaller than my thumb, but containing enough evidence to destroy Brandon's life. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, conspiracy. The cable wasn't just about television. It was about cutting me off from everything. My autonomy, my home, my dignity. Brandon had been erasing me piece by piece, preparing to make me disappear entirely. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd looked at a 67-year-old widower and seen weakness, someone to exploit and discard. He'd missed the part where that man had spent 42 years hunting down people exactly like him. People who thought they were smarter than everyone else. People who thought they could get away with anything. I'd exposed corrupt politicians, fraudulent corporations, con artists. I'd built a career on patient's documentation evidence. I'd never lost a story. Never let a guilty person walk free when I had proof. The watching was over. The evidence was gathered. Tomorrow today, since it was technically Saturday morning, the real work would begin. I tucked the USB drive into my desk drawer, set my phone on the charger, and finally lay back down. This time, exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. Not the fitful sleep of the past 18 months, but the deep rest of someone who knows exactly what battle they're fighting, and exactly how they're going to win. I woke at 5 in the morning without an alarm. 2 hours of sleep should have left me exhausted, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I lay there for maybe 30 seconds staring at the ceiling before the weight of what I discovered came rushing back. $47,000, a nursing home conspiracy, my own daughter potentially complicit. I got up. My desk was exactly where I had left it the USB drive sitting next to Catherine's wedding photo, like a talisman. I pulled out a fresh legal pad, the old-fashioned kind, yellow paper and green lines, and uncapped a pen. Some things don't change. Even in the age of laptops and smartphones, I still thought better with pen and paper. At the top of the page, I wrote October 19th, 2025, battle plan. Below it, a list: locksmith, lawyer, bank, evidence organization, exit strategy. Each item represented a step toward reclaiming my life. Each one would require precision timing and the kind of strategic thinking I'd honed over 4 decades of investigative journalism. This wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore. This was about deployment, about knowing exactly when and how to use what I'd found. I stared at the list, particularly at lawyer. I needed someone I could trust absolutely. Someone who knew me well enough to believe this story without questioning my competence. Someone who wouldn't look at a 67-year-old man claiming his son-in-law was trying to institutionalize him and wonder if maybe the old guy really was losing it. There was only one name that made sense. At 5:30, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd known by heart for 40 years. Charles Norton answered on the 3rd ring, his voice rough with sleep. "This better be good. Do you know what time it is?" "Charles, it's Frank Coleman. I need your help." The irritation vanished from his voice immediately. Charles and I went back to 1985, when we'd both been younger and stupider, working together to expose a city councilman taking kickbacks from construction companies. He'd been the legal expert who helped me navigate the complexities of proving corruption. I'd been the journalist who knew how to find the dirt and make it stick. We'd made a hell of a team. But Frank, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. Physically anyway. But I need a lawyer, Charles. It's about elder abuse. I paused, let the weight of it settle. And I'm the victim. Silence on the other end, then, "You're serious." Completely serious, in my own home. Jesus, Frank. I heard movement, probably him sitting up in bed. "Tell me what's happening." So I did. Kept it brief, hitting the main points. Brandon and Nicole living with me for 18 months. The cable incident yesterday. My overnight investigation. The credit card fraud, $47,000 over 6 months. The emails about putting me in memory care. The plan to sell my house. Charles listened without interrupting his breathing, the only sound that told me he was still there. When I finished, the silence stretched long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. "Hey, Charles, I'm here. He exhaled hard. Frank, this is serious. Elder financial abuse, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. If what you're telling me is accurate, if you have the documentation, Brandon could face 5 to 10 years in prison. I have the documentation, photos of everything, credit card statements, emails, the whole conspiracy laid out in his own words. And your daughter Nicole, what's her involvement, Bussy? That question hurt more than any of the others. I don't know. Brandon claims she agrees I need professional care. Whether that's true or whether he's manipulating her too, I can't tell yet. Okay. Charles's voice shifted into professional mode, the tone I remembered from 30 years of working together. First thing, don't confront them. Not yet. We need to secure everything legally. Can you meet Monday morning? My office, 9 o'clock. I'm I'll be there. Good. Between now and then, I need you to do a few things. Make copies of everything, multiple copies. Cloud storage, physical drives, whatever you can. Send me a set via encrypted email. And Frank, don't delete anything from his laptop. Don't move anything. We want to preserve the evidence chain. Already ahead of you on the copies. Cloud laptop, USB drive. I heard him smile through the phone. Still got those investigative instincts. Good. We're going to need them. After we hung up, I spent the next hour creating additional backups, uploaded everything to my secure cloud storage, made a second USB drive and put it in a different location, sent Charles an encrypted file with the most damaging evidence. Every step was methodical, careful, exactly how I'd handled sensitive documents during my journalism career. By 7 o'clock, I had 6 complete copies of evidence stored in different locations. Redundancy squared. Even if Brandon somehow discovered what I'd done and tried to destroy the originals, I'd still have everything I needed to bury him. I picked up the wedding photo from my desk. Catherine in her white dress, me in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit. 1982, a lifetime ago. She'd been 26. I'd been 39. People had said we were an odd match, her so young and full of life, me already set in my serious journalist ways. But she'd understood me in ways no one else ever had. You always said I let people walk over me, Kate, I whispered to the photograph. You'd get so frustrated when I'd rather avoid conflict than stand up for myself. Remember when my editor tried to kill that corruption story? You told me if I backed down, you'd never forgive me. I'd published that story. It had cost me 6 months of political warfare and nearly my job, but it had exposed the truth, and Catherine had been proud. I backed down a lot after you left. Let Brandon take over because fighting seemed too hard. Let Nicole drift away because I was afraid of losing her completely. You'd be disappointed in me. I set the photo down gently. But not anymore. Watch me fight, sweetheart. This one's for both of us. At 8 o'clock, I heard movement upstairs. Water running. Footsteps. The sounds of Brandon and Nicole starting their Saturday morning, as if yesterday's cable incident had been nothing. As if they hadn't spent months plotting to rob me blind and lock me away. I sat at my desk, legal pad in front of me. Evidence secured in multiple locations, lawyer consulted strategy forming. Brandon thought he was dealing with a confused old man, a non-threat, someone who could be pushed around and eventually erased. By Monday morning, he was going to learn exactly how wrong he'd been. I'd spent 42 years taking down people who thought they were untouchable. Brandon Chambers was just another name on a very long list, and I'd never failed to expose the truth yet. The sound of Brandon's truck backing out of the driveway at 7:45 that Monday morning was different somehow, sharper, more final. 5 minutes later, Nicole's sedan followed her tires crunching over the fallen October leaves that carpeted our street. I watched from the upstairs window until both vehicles turned the corner and disappeared. Then I reached for my phone. All Valdez locksmith Tony speaking. Tony, this is Frank Coleman over on Maple Drive. I need all my locks changed. Every entry point. Today. There was a brief pause on the line. Tony Valdez had been in business in our neighborhood for 30 years. He'd rekeyed my house back in 2003 when we'd lost a set of keys at the grocery store. Catherine had been with me that day laughing about how we'd torn the car apart looking for them. How soon can you be here, Frank? Ordeds. When did be the wicks farande? Oh, 9 o'clock work for you. I'll be there. Standard deadbolts on all doors. High security. The best you've got. Another pause shorter this time. Tony was a pro. He knew when not to ask questions. Got it. See you at 9. I hung up and looked at the clock. 1 hour and 15 minutes until the first lock turned. Until the first piece of my home became mine again. I spent that hour moving through the house like a ghost, cataloging everything that would soon be behind new locks. The front door where Brandon had stood 2 nights ago with that black cable in his hand. The back door where he'd started parking his truck too close to mine, boxing me in. The garage door. The basement entrance. 4 points of entry. 4 places where they'd come and gone as they pleased, treating my home like it was already theirs. At 8:55, Tony's white van pulled into the driveway. I met him at the door before he could knock. "Morning, Frank." He was carrying 2 heavy toolboxes and had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Professional, efficient. "Let's start with the front door, then work our way around." "Whatever you think is best." He set down his equipment and pulled out a drill. "This won't take long. High security deadbolt's thumb, turn on the inside, keyed on the outside. You'll get 5 sets of keys for each lock." 5 sets. I hadn't thought about that. 5 sets meant control. 5 sets meant I could decide who got in and who stayed out. The drill bit into the old lock at 9:15. The sound cut through 18 months of silence, of tiptoeing around my own home, of pretending not to hear them in the next room planning my future. Metal shavings fell to the doorstep like snow. Tony worked with the ease of someone who'd done this 10,000 times, his hands steady and sure. There we go. The old deadbolt came free with a metallic scrape. This one's seen better days. I held it in my palm. It was warm from the friction of removal, the brass worn smooth in places. How many times had Brandon's key turned this lock? How many times had they walked through my door without knocking, without asking, treating my threshold like it was theirs? "Toss it, please." He dropped it into a bucket with a satisfying clang and reached for the new lock. This one was chrome, heavy, solid. When he installed it and handed me the first key, it felt like holding a piece of my dignity. "Try it." I slid the key into the lock. It turned smooth as butter. Click. The bolt shot home. Click. It retracted. 4 times I tested it, feeling the precision of new mechanisms, the promise of security. Back door next. We moved through the house in silence. The drill sang its metallic song at the back entrance at 9:45. Same process. Old lock out, new lock in. Tony worked with the kind of efficiency that comes from decades of experience, never wasting emotion. A garage at 10:15. Lead the way. By the time we reached the basement door at 10:45, I'd started to feel something I hadn't felt in 18 months. Not quite freedom yet, more like the possibility of freedom. Each new lock was a barrier, yes, but more than that, it was a choice. My choice. About who could enter my space and who couldn't. That's the last one. Tony wiped his hands on a rag and started gathering his tools. 4 high-security deadbolts. 20 keys total, 5 sets for each door. Keep them separated, maybe give a set to someone you trust. I thought immediately of Charles Norton. 1 set for him, 1 for my safe deposit box. 1 hidden in the house, 1 in my car, 1 on my person. "But what do I owe you, Tony?" He named a figure. I pulled out my wallet and added $200 bills on top. For the discretion, Tony looked at the extra money, then at me. Something passed across his face, understanding maybe, or recognition. He'd been in this business long enough to know that not all lock changes were about lost keys. "You take care of yourself, Frank." He pocketed the cash and extended his hand. His grip was firm, solid, the handshake of a man who understood that some work was about more than just locks and keys. I walked him to the door, my door with my new lock, and watched his van pull away. Then I turned back to the empty house and tested each lock 1 more time. Front door, click. Back door, click. Garage, click. Basement, click. 4 locks, 20 keys, and for the first time in 18 months I smiled. By 11:30, Tony's van had disappeared down Maple Drive, and I had 4 new keys in my pocket, 1 for each lock he'd installed. But keeping Brandon and Nicole out physically was only half the battle. Keeping them out legally required something else. Something every investigative journalist knows how to build a war room. I stood in my bedroom doorway and looked at the space with fresh eyes. For 18 months, this room had been my sanctuary. Now it was going to become something Catherine would have recognized from the old days when I'd bring home a story that needed unraveling. The desk came first. I cleared everything off lamp library books, the framed photo of Catherine and me at Niagara Falls. Everything went to the dresser. The desk surface needed to be empty, ready for organization. Then I pulled out the yellow legal pad where I'd started taking notes Friday night. The credit card statements I'd photographed. The screenshots of emails between Brandon and Susan Whitfield. 43 photos total, all backed up in 6 locations. Time to make them tell a story. I'd spent 42 years at the Chicago Tribune making evidence speak. This was no different, just more personal. I started with the wall above my desk. 18 months of my life reduced to a timeline written on sticky notes. April 2024. Brandon and Nicole move in. Temporary, they'd said. June 2024. First irregular charge, $890 at a steakhouse. August 2024. Brandon starts talking about how I'm wasting money on utilities. October 2024. I catch him going through my mail. He laughs it off. February 2025. The nursing home emails begin. Brandon to Susan Whitfield, looking to arrange care for an elderly relative. September 2025. Susan sends the Sunrise Meadows brochure, application filled out with my information, my signature forged. October 18th, 2025. Brandon cuts the cable. October 21st, 2025. Tony installs new locks. I take my house back. I stepped back and looked at the wall. When you saw it laid out like that, the pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't a son-in-law who'd overstayed his welcome. This was a predator who'd been circling from the start. Next came the evidence categories. 3 folders, 3 colors. I'd learned this system covering the city corruption scandal back in 2009. Red folder, financial evidence. Credit card statements showing $47,000 in fraudulent charges. Screenshots of my forged signature compared to my real one. Bank records showing my checking account balance dropping from comfortable to concerning. Blue folder, communication evidence. Every email between Brandon and Susan Whitfield, the nursing home brochure. Text messages I'd photographed from Brandon's phone last week. Messages to Nicole about when the old man's out of the picture. Green folder, witness statements. Barbara Peterson next door had seen Brandon carry boxes from my basement back in July. Arthur Coleman 3 doors down had heard Brandon on the phone talking about property values. Karen Phillips across the street had noticed I'd stopped waving hello around the same time Brandon started answering my doorbell. The folders went on the desk left to right, beginning, middle, end. At 11:45, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. Stephen Hughes. Steve, it's Frank Coleman. Silence. Then, Frank, haven't heard from you since spring. Everything okay? Stephen Hughes and I had worked together for 20 years at the Tribune. He'd moved to the Sun-Times in 2015, but we'd stayed in touch. The kind of friendship built on shared newsroom cynicism. I need a favor. Can you track down an address for me? In Borf. What kind of address? The kind someone needs when they lose their apartment and have to find something cheap, fast. Stephen knew better than to ask too many questions. Give me 2 hours. I'll text you. Thanks, Steve. I hung up and went back to the desk. One more piece to complete the war room. The summary. In journalism, we called it the nut graph. The paragraph that explained the whole story. I opened my laptop and started typing. The 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why. Frank Coleman, 67. Retired investigative journalist, is the sole owner of a residential property valued at approximately $800,000. In April 2024, his daughter Nicole Coleman and son-in-law Brandon Chambers moved into the residence under pretense of temporary housing. Over 18 months, Brandon Chambers engaged in systematic financial exploitation, including credit card fraud totaling $47,000 identity theft, and conspiracy to unlawfully commit the victim to a long-term care facility for the purpose of obtaining control of the property through fraudulent power of attorney. 3 sentences, everything that mattered. By 2 o'clock, the war room was complete. Timeline on the wall, evidence in folders, summary report printed. I stood in the middle of my bedroom and felt something I hadn't felt since Friday afternoon. Control. Not angry, desperate control. This was colder, more methodical. The control of a man who'd spent his career taking down people who thought they were untouchable. My phone buzzed. Text from Stephen. Found 3 possibilities. Oak Towers on 4th Street is closest and cheapest. Studio apartments, month-to-month leases. I saved the address and looked at the war room one more time. Evidence collected. Timeline established. Witnesses identified. The war room was ready. The evidence was sorted. Now came the part every journalist understands: proof means nothing if you don't act. Untouched facts are just paper in a folder. At 2:30, I grabbed my car keys and drove to Community First Bank on Oakwood Avenue, the same branch where Catherine and I opened our first joint account in 1983. The same place that had handled my Tribune paychecks for 42 years. The same tellers who knew us by name and sent flowers when Catherine died. Now I was here to tell them my own family had been stealing from me. The lobby was calm for a Monday afternoon. 2 tellers behind the counter, an elderly couple speaking quietly at the mortgage desk. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. I approached the reception desk where a young woman wearing a name tag that read, Jessica, looked up. "I need to speak with a branch manager," I said. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No, it's about fraud on my account. It's urgent." Her expression changed instantly. "Please have a seat. I'll check if Miss Foster is available." I sat in the waiting area with the red folder resting on my lap. Through the glass walls, I could see Linda Foster inside her office phone pressed to her ear. Mid-50s dark hair, pulled back posture, sharp with decades of banking experience. She glanced up, recognized me, and nodded. 10 minutes later, Jessica led me inside. "Mr. Coleman." Linda stood and shook my hand firmly. "Jessica mentioned fraud. Please sit." I placed the red folder between us. "Ms. Foster, I need to report identity theft and credit card fraud. I'm the victim." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "When did you discover the activity?" "Friday night, but it's been happening for 6 months." I opened the folder. Credit card statements with highlighted charges, signature comparisons, screenshots showing luxury purchases I never made. Linda leaned forward, scanning each page. When she reached the signature comparison, her mouth tightened. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "this totals $47,000. "Yes, and you only discovered this recently." I trusted the wrong person. She looked at me, and I recognized that look the moment when a professional realizes this isn't a minor issue. "Who did this?" "My son-in-law. He intercepted my mail, forged my signature, and used my credit card without permission." She exhaled slowly and reached for her phone. "This qualifies as elder financial abuse. It's a serious crime." "I know. I covered financial crimes for the Chicago Tribune." Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe respect. She dialed an internal number. "This is Linda Foster, Oakwood branch. I need fraud services for identity theft and unauthorized use. Amount approximately $47,000 over 6 months." She listened. "Yes, I'll hold." While waiting, she pulled up my account history. I watched her scroll through transaction after transaction. Steakhouses I'd never visited, boutiques I'd never entered. A luxury hotel stay while I'd been home watching documentaries. "Yes, I'm here," she said into the phone. "Account number." She read it aloud. "Freeze all cards immediately. Initiate disputes on all flagged charges. The customer is present with documentation." "Understood." She ended the call and faced me. "Your card is frozen as of now. No purchases can be made. We're also placing enhanced fraud protection on your account. Any transaction over $50 will require voice verification directly from you." "Good. I'll also give you documentation for law enforcement and legal counsel." She glanced at the folder. "Do you have an attorney?" "Charles Norton." Her lips curved slightly. "Charlie Norton." "I know him. You're in good hands." She spent the next 20 minutes generating reports, completing affidavits, and creating a formal trail. Each time I signed my name, my real signature, I felt a measure of control return. "Mr. Coleman," she said carefully, "does your daughter know what her husband has been doing?" The question hit harder than any number on those statements. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm going to find out." She organized the paperwork and handed me a final folder. "This confirms the fraud report case number, disputed amount, date filed. Keep copies." "I always do." She smiled faintly. Journalist habit. Something like that. She walked me to the door. "I'm sorry this happened. No one should have to defend themselves from family." No, I agreed. They shouldn't. I left the bank at 4 o'clock with the fraud confirmation in hand and $47,000 officially frozen. The October sun slanted low across the parking lot, shadows stretching long. In less than 2 hours, Brandon and Nicole would come home. They'd pull into the driveway like every Monday. Brandon would reach for his key, and it wouldn't work. I drove home with the fraud report on the passenger seat, ready for what came next. The house was quiet when I walked through the front door at 4:30. The new lock turned smoothly under my key now not theirs. I set the bank's fraud confirmation letter on the kitchen counter and looked at the clock on the microwave. Brandon and Nicole usually got home between 6 and 6:30. That gave me 2 hours. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom they'd been using. My old home office, the one Catherine had helped me paint a soft gray back in 2012. The door was open. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at how they had rearranged it. Their bed where my desk used to be. Brandon's suits hanging in the closet where I'd kept my file cabinets. Nicole's nursing scrubs draped over the chair. 18 months ago, I'd helped them carry boxes up these stairs. "Just temporary," Nicole had said, hugging me. "We'll be out of your hair before you know it, Dad." I walked to the closet and pulled out 4 large suitcases. Blue hard-shell Samsonites. I'd bought them for Nicole last Christmas when she'd mentioned wanting to take a vacation. She'd never used them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I started with Brandon's side of the closet. Suits came off hangers and went into the first suitcase. No folding, no care. Just removal. Gray suit, navy suit. The expensive charcoal one he'd worn to some real estate conference in August, probably paid for with my stolen credit card. Shoes went next, dress shoes, sneakers. The Italian leather loafers that cost $600, according to the statement Linda Foster had shown me. Into the suitcase. All of it. His toiletries from the bathroom, electric razor, cologne, hair gel. The laptop charger he always left plugged in by the bed. I unplugged it and coiled it, loosely dropping it on top of the suits. The first suitcase filled fast. I zipped it closed and moved to the second one. Nicole's side of the closet was harder. I reached for a hanger and stopped, the cream-colored cardigan she'd worn last Christmas morning. We'd made pancakes together, her, me, Brandon, Catherine's recipe. Nicole had laughed at something, and for a moment it had felt like family again. Like maybe having them here wasn't so bad after all. I folded the cardigan carefully and placed it in the suitcase. Her nursing scrubs, her sneakers, the collection of scarves she kept organized by color, her hairbrush from the dresser. Each item felt heavier than it should have. I opened her nightstand drawer to pack whatever was inside and found a photograph, 5x7, in a silver frame I'd given her when she graduated high school. Nicole at 5 years old, gap-toothed smile, clutching the teddy bear I'd won for her at the county fair. She'd named it Mr. Buttons, slept with it every night until she was 12. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the photo. I'd helped her pack for college in 2007, driven her to Northwestern with a trunk full of dreams and new bed sheets. Watched her walk into the dorm with that same gap-toothed confidence, ready to become a nurse and help people. 18 years later, I was packing her belongings to put her out of my house. The weight of it settled in my chest. Not anger, something else. Something that felt like grief. I loved my daughter more than life itself. I'd have given her anything. I had given her everything. This house might trust 18 months of benefit of the doubt. But I couldn't let that love destroy me. Not anymore. I placed the photo face down in the suitcase and kept packing. The second suitcase filled, then the third. By the time I zipped the fourth one closed, my hands were shaking. Not from weakness, from the finality of it. Getting the suitcases downstairs was harder than I'd expected. 67-year-old legs don't handle 4 trips up and down with 50-pound loads the way they used to. But adrenaline is a hell of a drug, and I was running on more than adrenaline. I was running on 42 years of finding truth and 18 months of living with lies. I dragged each suitcase to the front door and lined them up. 4 blue Samsonites standing in a row like soldiers awaiting orders. Everything Brandon and Nicole had brought into this house packed and ready to leave it. The clock in the hallway read 5:28. I walked to the living room and sat in the armchair, the one Catherine had loved, the one that faced the front window. From here, I could see the driveway. I could see when they pulled in, when Brandon tried his key and realized it didn't work, when they saw the suitcases. I thought about the war room upstairs, the timeline on the wall, the evidence in folders, the fraud report from the bank in the kitchen, Charles Norton's office tomorrow morning at 9. I thought about the black cable lying in the box of old electronics in the basement, the cable that had changed everything. And I thought about Nicole, my daughter, the gap-toothed 5-year-old who believed I could do anything. The 38-year-old woman who'd stood in this living room 3 nights ago and taken her husband's side while he humiliated me. Did she know? Had she known about the credit cards, the nursing home plan, or had Brandon played her the same way he'd played me? I didn't know, but in less than an hour I was going to find out. The house settled around me. The refrigerator hummed. The October sun slanted lower through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Catherine and I had refinished together in 1998. I sat in the armchair and watched the driveway. And I waited. The wait ended at exactly 6:07. I heard Brandon's truck first, that aggressive rumble he thought made him sound successful. Then Nicole's sedan, quieter, pulling in right behind. I didn't move from the armchair. I just listened. Car doors. 2 of them. One slam, one soft close. Footsteps on the front walk. The scrape of shoes on the welcome mat Catherine had picked out at Target back in 2016. The mat that said "Home Sweet Home" in careful cursive. Then the sound I'd been waiting for. Metal on metal, a key sliding into a lock that no longer recognized it. Scraping, jiggling, a confused grunt. Brandon's voice muffled through the door. Key's not working, must be stuck or something. Let me try. Nicole's voice, softer, still trusting that there was a simple explanation. More scraping, more jiggling, the doorknob rattled. That's weird, mine's not working either. I sat perfectly still in Catherine's chair. Through the front window, I could see their shadows on the porch. Brandon bent over the lock, Nicole standing behind him, her purse still on her shoulder. This doesn't make any sense. Brandon's voice had changed, sharper now, suspicion creeping in. Frank, you in there?" I didn't answer. The doorknob shook harder, metal grinding against metal. Is Frank if this is some kind of joke? Sart. "Maybe he's not home," Nicole said. "Maybe there's something wrong with the lock. We should call a locksmith." "His car's in the driveway, Kins. He's home." Through the window, I watched Brandon straighten up, watched him look at Nicole, watched the moment when confusion started turning into something else. "Come on." His shadow moved away from the door, back entrance. I listened to their footsteps circle the house, listened to them disappear around the corner. At 6:12, I heard them at the back door. The same sounds: key, lock, failure, frustration. At 6:15, the garage door. Brandon's voice carried through the walls. "What the hell is going on?" At 6:18, I heard them at the basement window, the one that stuck in humid weather, the one Brandon had jimmied open last summer when I'd locked myself out working in the garden. It didn't open now. Tony Valdez had been thorough. The footsteps came back around to the front, faster this time, heavier. Then the pounding started. Brandon's fist hit the door 3 times, hard enough to rattle the frame. "I know you're in there. Open the door." I stayed seated, kept my breathing steady, kept my eyes on the window where I could see him red-faced, knouty, loosened one hand, braced against the doorframe while the other hammered. "Brandon." Nicole's voice was worried now. Actually worried. "Brandon, calm down. Maybe something's wrong. Maybe Dad's hurt or..." "Something's wrong, all right." Another 3 pounds on the door. "That old bastard changed the locks." Silence. I watched Nicole's shadow go still. "What?" "Oh, the locks. Nicole, he changed the goddamn locks. That's why our keys don't work." "But why would he do that?" "How the hell should I know? Maybe he's finally lost it. Maybe we need to call someone. Have him evaluated as Frank, more pounding. The door shook in its frame. "Open this door right now." Across the street, I saw movement in Barbara Peterson's window. The curtain pulled aside just an inch. Barb's face pale in the evening light watching. Good. Witnesses mattered. "You can't just lock us out!" Brandon was shouting now, full volume. The kind of shouting that carried down suburban streets on quiet October evenings. "This is my house, too. I live here." "Brandon, please." Nicole's voice was small, scared. Not of me, I realized. Of him. Of whatever was happening that she didn't understand yet. "Open the goddamn door." The pounding intensified. Both fists now. The kind of noise that would have the neighbors calling the police if I let it go on much longer. I looked at the clock on the mantel. 6:19. 12 minutes since they had arrived. 12 minutes of escalation. Of Brandon revealing exactly who he was when things didn't go his way. I stood up slowly. My knees protested too much. Time sitting too much, adrenaline wearing off. I walked past the 4 blue suitcases lined up like soldiers. Past the kitchen where the fraud report still sat on the counter. Into the front hallway where the pounding was loud enough to hurt my ears. Through the peephole I could see Brandon, face red, veins in his neck standing out, fist raised for another round of hammering. Behind him, Nicole, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide, my daughter. 38 years old, and looking like she had at 5, scared, confused, needing someone to explain what was happening. I unlocked the deadbolt, the new one, the one that had cost me $240 and Tony Valdez's discretion. Then I opened the door. I opened the door exactly 6 inches, just enough for them to see my face, not enough to step inside. The security chain stretched tight between us, a visible boundary they had crossed and could not undo. Brandon's eyes dropped to the chain, then snapped back to me. Shock flickered into confusion, then hardened into rage. "Can I help you?" My voice was calm, steady, the voice I used in interview rooms when I needed someone to talk themselves into the truth. Help us. Brandon's face flushed red. What did you do to the locks? What the hell is wrong with you? This is my house. Actually, Brandon, you may want to check the deed. This is my house. My name. Mortgage paid off in 2008. You were a guest. Past tense. Dad? Nicole's voice cracked. Dad? What's going on? Why can't we get in? I looked at my daughter through that narrow opening. Her mascara was slightly smudged, her eyes tired and frightened. She looked 38 years old and suddenly very young. Because I know about the credit card, $47,000 stolen from me. I know about the nursing home plan. I know everything. The words settled heavily between us. Brandon shoved the door. The chain held. You're insane, he shouted. You're senile. You don't know what you're talking about. I reached behind me and picked up the credit card statement I'd printed at the bank. I held it to the gap. Forged signature. The fraud department confirmed it. Would you like to see the report? Nicole, Brandon said, quickly softening his tone. Don't listen to him. He's confused. He's old. He's connecting things that aren't real. I was a journalist for 42 years, I said. I know how to document evidence. I know how to build a case. I raised the printed emails. I have your correspondence with Sunrise Meadows. Applications with my information already filled in. A timeline for selling my house once you had me committed. Nicole's face drained of color. She turned slowly toward her husband. Dad, her voice trembled. Is this true? Of course it's not, Brandon snapped, gripping her arm. Not violently, not yet, but possessively. He's paranoid. This is exactly why we were trying to get him help. Then explain this, I said, sliding one email through the gap. It fluttered onto the porch. Nicole picked it up. Her eyes moved across the page. Her breathing changed. Brandon, she said quietly, this is your email. This is real. Nicole, let me explain. You were going to put my father in a nursing home. Her voice rose. You were going to sell his house without telling me. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Brandon turned back to me. The mask cracked completely. This is your fault, he hissed. You're stubborn. You can't live alone. You need care. We were trying to help you. By stealing $47,000. That money was going to be ours anyway, when you died. When the house sold, we were just speeding things up. Silence fell. Nicole stared at him. What did you just say? Brandon froze. He knew what he'd done. The truth was out raw and irreversible. You don't understand, he said desperately. This house is worth $800,000. $800,000. And it's wasted on one old man. He lunged. The chain caught him. The door frame rattled. I stepped back but held my ground. I suggest you step away, I said calmly. Barbara Peterson across the street is watching. And assault is a crime. Brandon backed off, chest heaving. His hands shook with restrained fury. He pulled out his phone. Fine. I'm calling the police. Reporting elder abuse. You're not competent. Please do, I said. I have the fraud report, the forged signatures, the emails, and a meeting with my attorney tomorrow morning, Charles Norton. His finger hovered over the screen. You're bluffing. I spent 42 years calling bluffs Brandon. I don't bluff. Behind him, Nicole had collapsed onto the porch steps, the email clutched in her hands. Her shoulders shook. Nicole, I said gently, did you know about the card? About the nursing home? She looked up at me through the gap eyes, red and wet. No, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. I believed her. Brandon lowered the phone. You can't do this, he said. We have rights. You don't, I replied. You're not on the deed. Your belongings are packed. 4 suitcases. You can collect them now. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, I said. But you should have thought about that earlier. Brandon stared at me, hatred naked in his eyes. This isn't over. Yes, I said softly. It is. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, heard it lock. And through the wood and steel, I heard my daughter begin to cry. Red and blue lights washed across the front of my house at 6:45, 2 police cruisers pulling up to the curb with that deliberate slowness that says, we're here, everyone pay attention. I watched through the living room window as the lights painted the October evening in strobing colors. Across the street, Barbara Peterson's front door opened. 2 houses down, Karen Phillips stepped onto her porch. Arthur Coleman appeared at his mailbox, not bothering to pretend he wasn't staring. The cavalry Brandon had called, or maybe the witnesses I needed. 2 officers emerged from the cruisers. The first was mid-40s solid build, the kind of presence that came from 20 years on the job. His nameplate read Reynolds. The second was at younger early 30s, maybe following Reynolds' lead. Davis. Brandon met them halfway up the walk, his voice carrying in the evening quiet. "Officers, thank God you're here." He pointed at the house, at me, still visible through the window. "My father-in-law, he's having some kind of episode. He's locked us out of the house, our own home. He's acting completely erratic. We're worried for his safety. He might be having a stroke or, I don't know, maybe dementia finally." Behind him, Nicole stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around herself. Her face was blotchy from crying. When she spoke, her voice shook. "He's not usually like this. Dad's always been so normal. I don't understand what's happening anymore." Officer Reynolds held up one hand. "Everyone just calm down. Let's take this one step at a time." He looked at Brandon, then at Nicole, then at the house. "Sir, you're saying this is your father-in-law's residence." "Yes, but we've been living here for 18 months. We're family. We have rights." "And is he the homeowner, legal owner?" Brandon hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Well, yes, technically, but then let's start there." Reynolds walked up to the front door, knocked, professional, firm. "Sir, police. Can you come to the door, please?" I was already there, standing behind the door I'd closed 15 minutes ago. I opened it, the same 6 inches chain still engaged. "Officer Reynolds?" "Yes, sir. Are you the homeowner?" "I am Frank Coleman, sole owner. Paid off the mortgage in 2008. Reynolds nodded slowly. His eyes took in the chain, the 6-inch gap, my calm demeanor. "Mr. Coleman, your son-in-law called us. He says you've locked them out. He's concerned about your mental state." But officer. "I'm a retired investigative journalist. I worked for the Chicago Tribune for 42 years. My mental state is fine. What's not fine is the $47,000 they stole from me." I paused. "Could I show you something inside, just you?" Reynolds glanced back at Brandon and Nicole, then at his partner. "Mr. Chambers, Miss Coleman, please wait here with Officer Davis. I'm going inside to speak with Mr. Coleman." "But you can't just," Brandon started. "Sir, this is his property. If he invites me in, I'm going in. Please wait here." I unhooked the chain and opened the door. Reynolds stepped through. I closed it behind him, leaving Brandon's protests muffled on the other side. In the living room, I'd already set up everything on the coffee table, like a journalist presenting a story, like a man who'd spent 4 decades building cases. "Officer, this is the property deed, my name only. This is my paid-off mortgage statement from 2008. I laid them out. "These are credit card statements showing $47,000 in fraudulent charges over the past 6 months. These are signature comparisons, mine versus the forgeries. These are emails between my son-in-law and a nursing home consultant planning to have me committed so they could sell my house." Reynolds pulled out a small flashlight and examined each document. Took his time, 5 full minutes of careful review. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Coleman, what you're describing is elder financial abuse, identity theft, potentially conspiracy to commit fraud. You have every right to refuse them entry to your home. In fact, given this evidence, I'd advise it. I just want my house back, officer, and I want them held accountable. I'll need to file a report. You should contact an attorney." He paused, noticing Charles Norton's business card on the table. "I see you already have. That's good. That's very good." He made notes in a small pad, photographed several of the documents with his phone camera. When he was satisfied, he stood. "Mr. Coleman, you're the victim here, not them. Don't let anyone tell you different." We walked back to the front door together. When Reynolds opened it and stepped out, Officer Davis was standing with Brandon and Nicole exactly where they'd been left. Neighbors still watching from porches and doorways. The blue and red lights still painting everything in alternating colors. Reynolds walked down the porch steps and faced them. "Mr. Chambers, Miss Coleman, I've reviewed the situation. This property belongs to Frank Coleman. He has provided documentation of financial crimes committed against him. You are not legal residents of this property. You need to leave. Now." Brandon's face went red. "This is absolutely insane. We live here. That old man is making things up. He's confused. Sir, I've seen the documents, bank statements, forged signatures, email correspondence about nursing home placement without his knowledge or consent. If you don't leave this property voluntarily in the next 5 minutes, I will arrest you for unlawful trespass and potentially for the crimes Mr. Coleman has documented." "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious, Mr. Chambers." Officer Davis cleared his throat. "Officers, there are 4 suitcases by the front door. Looks like Mr. Coleman has already packed their belongings." Reynolds glanced at me. I nodded. "Then I suggest you collect them and leave. Now." The humiliation of it must have been excruciating. Brandon Chambers, who'd walked these streets for 18 months like he owned them, now forced to carry suitcases to his truck under the eyes of Barbara Peterson, Karen Phillips, Arthur Coleman, and half the block. He grabbed 2 suitcases, didn't look at me, didn't look at the neighbors, just stormed to his truck with that aggressive stride that didn't quite hide the rage shaking his shoulders. Nicole stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the other 2 suitcases. Then she looked up at me, still standing in the doorway. "Dad." One word. That's all she said. One word that contained 18 months of history and 38 years of being my daughter, and the weight of realizing she'd chosen the wrong side. I didn't respond, couldn't. The words were tangled somewhere between my heart and my throat, trapped by everything I wanted to say and everything I couldn't. She picked up the other 2 suitcases, walked to Brandon's truck, loaded them in the back without looking at him either. They got in. Engine started. Brandon backed out of the driveway, my driveway, for the last time. The truck rolled down Maple Drive taillights, getting smaller, turning the corner, disappearing. Officer Reynolds approached me, where I still stood in the doorway. "Mr. Coleman, you did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you protected yourself. That matters." "Thank you, officer. File that report with your attorney. Prosecute if you can. People like that, they don't stop until someone makes them." He handed me a card with his report number on it. Then he and Officer Davis got back in their cruisers and drove away, taking the blue and red lights with them. The street went dark again. Normal suburban October evening, dark. Slowly the neighbors went back inside. Barb Peterson last, lingering on her porch, catching my eye. She nodded once, just once. Then she went in too. I stood in my doorway, my house, my lock, my key, and looked at the empty driveway. 7:15 on a Monday night. 18 months of invasion ended in 30 minutes. I went inside and closed the door. By 8 o'clock, the street had gone quiet again. The neighbors had retreated indoors, though I was certain phones were ringing behind drawn curtains, voices replaying what they had just witnessed. The police cruisers were gone. The red and blue lights had faded into memory. And I was alone, truly alone for the first time in 18 months. I closed the door, my lock, my house, and leaned back against it. I stood there with my eyes closed, drawing in a slow, careful breath, the kind I hadn't been able to take since April of 2024. The silence felt different. Not the tense silence of watching my words, wondering if Brandon would be in one of his moods, or if Nicole would give me that look that said, "Let it go, Dad." This silence had weight, but it didn't crush me. It belonged to me. I walked through the house slowly, the living room first, the armchair where I'd sat earlier waiting for them to come home, the coffee table where I'd laid out evidence for Officer Reynolds less than an hour ago. Everything was still, everything intact. The kitchen came next. Brandon's coffee mug sat in the sink, the expensive ceramic one with a smug quote about success. I washed it, dried it, and put it in the cabinet. Tomorrow I'd donate it. Tonight I just needed it gone. His shoes waited by the back door, size 11. Nikes barely worn. I picked them up, slid them into a plastic bag, and set them aside. His jacket hung over a dining chair, navy blue, real estate logo stitched over the chest. I folded it and added it to the pile. Each item I cleared felt like reclaiming territory, like planting a flag on ground that had been occupied too long. This space is mine again. At 8:30, I opened the refrigerator and really looked inside. For months, I'd eaten whatever was quickest, whatever caused the least friction. Tonight, I pulled out pasta butter garlic. Simple. The kind of meal Catherine used to make when neither of us felt like fussing. I boiled water, minced garlic, melted butter in a pan. The smell filled the kitchen warm and familiar, and for the first time since they'd moved in, the house smelled like my cooking. I sat at the dining table instead of standing at the counter. No television, no conversation. Just the sound of my fork against the plate and the steady hum of the refrigerator. Peaceful, that was the word. But peace invites memory. I thought about Nicole, about the way she'd looked at me on the sidewalk when she said Dad. One word carrying 18 months of confusion and 38 years of being my daughter. Did she know about the nursing home plan, about the credit cards? Or had she been fooled too, manipulated by a man skilled at control? The doubt crept in quietly. What if she truly didn't know? What if I'd destroyed my relationship with my daughter over something done without her consent? Then I remembered. She'd defended him every time, when he took over my mail, when he spoke to me like a child, when he made me feel like a guest in my own home. She'd told me I was overreacting, that I was sensitive, that he meant well. She had chosen him. Repeatedly. At 9, I called Charles Norton. He answered quickly. Frank, I was waiting to hear from you. The police came. Officer Reynolds reviewed everything. Told them to leave. They're gone. That's good, he said. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. That's honest. Listen, you did everything right, but you need to prepare yourself. Brandon won't accept this quietly. I know. Stay in your house, but be careful. Lock your doors. Call me if anything happens. I will. We'll meet tomorrow at 9. We'll start the legal process. Restraining order, civil suit, possibly criminal charges. See you then. After I hung up, the house felt larger, quieter. The old clock Catherine bought in 1994 ticked steadily on the mantel. At 10, I turned on the news, watched stories that had nothing to do with me. Tried not to imagine where Nicole and Brandon were sleeping. My eyes drifted to a photograph on the side table. Catherine, 45, smiling in our backyard. 2002, healthy, happy. Did I do the right thing? I asked the empty room. Did I choose survival over our daughter's happiness? The photo didn't answer. Memory did. Catherine in the hospital, October the 2020. Frail but sharp-eyed. She'd squeezed my hand and made me promise. Take care of Nicole, she whispered. I will. But Frank, she'd said, tightening her grip. Promise you'll take care of yourself, too. Don't let anyone make you small. I'd promised. 3 days later, she was gone. 5 years later, I'd finally kept both promises. At 11, I went upstairs, brushed my teeth in a bathroom free of Brandon's cologne, slid into my bed, and pulled the covers close. The house creaked in familiar places. The October wind brushed the windows. Tomorrow would bring lawyers' judgment and consequences. But tonight I was just tired. 3 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. On Tuesday, I met Charles at his office and signed paperwork, restraining order petition, fraud declarations, civil suit preparation. My signature, my real signature, went on document after document, while Charles explained timelines in that calm attorney voice that made everything sound survivable. On Wednesday, I called a glazier to replace the front window, the one where the cable had hung. I told him I'd broken it while moving furniture. A small lie, but easier than explaining I needed to erase the reminder. I called Nicole twice that day, both times voicemail. I didn't leave messages. I had no words that wouldn't sound like accusations or apologies for surviving. By Thursday morning, worry had teeth. It gnawed through breakfast, through my second cup of coffee, through the news I wasn't really watching. So I did what I'd done for 42 years. I investigated. At 9, I called Stephen Hughes. Frank was hoping you'd call. I got what you asked for. That was fast. Old habits. Papers rustled. There's a place called Oak Towers on the east side. Studios weekly rent, no questions. If someone needed somewhere cheap and immediate, that's where they'd go. Address. A pause. Frank, are you tracking someone? My daughter, I said. And I know how that sounds. Christ. More rustling. 1247 Oak Street. Apartment 3B. Lease signed Monday night. Name on it is Brandon Chambers. Not Nicole. Just him. Frank, what's going on? Soon. And Steve, thank you. Be careful. I hung up and stared at the address on my yellow pad. My daughter was living somewhere that rented by the week. By 2, I was parked across from Oak Towers. 4 stories of faded brick, rusted fire escapes, bars on windows, graffiti on the entrance, a liquor store on one corner, check cashing on the other. This was where Nicole slept after 12-hour nursing shifts. Because I'd thrown her out, or because Brandon had stolen $47,000 and destroyed their life. The distinction mattered. I watched for an hour. A woman with 2 kids struggling with groceries. An old man smoking. A teenager who looked hollow-eyed and lost. At 3, the door opened and Brandon walked out. Even from across the street, I could tell he was drunk. Middle of the afternoon, swaying, fumbling with his keys. He dropped them, laughed, picked them up, finally got into his truck. Part of me wanted to follow him, document the behavior, build another file. But this wasn't journalism anymore. This was obsession. I watched his truck pull away, weaving slightly, then I drove the opposite direction. At 4, I stopped at Barbara Peterson's house. She answered wearing gardening gloves. Frank, you holding up. I am. I need a favor. I handed her a card with my number. If Nicole comes by looking for me, give her this. Tell her I'm always here if she needs me. Exactly that. Barbara's expression softened. We all saw what happened Monday. The police. Everything. You did the right thing. Did I? Frank, we've lived here 30 years. We know who you are. Don't doubt yourself now. I nodded and left before I said something I couldn't take back. At 6, Charles called while I made dinner I wasn't hungry for. Restraining order hearing is next Thursday. Police officially opened the fraud investigation. Civil suit will be filed early November. That's good. One more thing. I tried reaching your daughter. She hasn't responded. She's not answering me either. How are you handling that? I'm giving her space. She needs to see who Brandon really is on her own. And if she doesn't, then I accept I protected myself and told the truth. The rest is her choice. Charles was quiet. That's healthy, Frank. But it still hurts. Yes. By 10, I sat in the living room with the TV muted decaf, cooling untouched phone, face up on the table, like it might ring if I stared hard enough. It didn't. I thought about Nicole in that apartment, about Brandon drunk at 3 in the afternoon, about the kind of man who ruins everything and then numbs himself while his wife works herself raw. I thought about Catherine's promise. Take care of Nicole, but also take care of yourself. Was I doing that, letting her live in Oak Towers while I worried in my paid-off house? Or was this the only thing left, letting her see the truth without me forcing it? The phone stayed silent. Outside, the October wind rattled the newly repaired window, and I waited, still waiting for my daughter to come home. Friday passed quietly, too quietly. I went to bed around midnight, exhausted from another day of waiting for phone calls that didn't come, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, that the stillness was temporary, that men like Brandon Chambers don't accept defeat, they marinate in it until it turns to rage. At 2:14 in the morning, I learned I was right. Quick note. What follows contains some fictionalized elements added for educational purposes, but the lessons I'm sharing remain meaningful. The sound of breaking glass tore through my sleep like an alarm I couldn't turn off. Not a crack, not a tap, a full-volume crash that said something heavy had just gone through something expensive. I was up before my brain fully processed what was happening, heart slamming in my chest. Phone already in my hand, 42 years of journalism had trained me to grab documentation. First, ask questions. Second, another crash, living room window. I ran to the upstairs window that overlooked the front yard and looked down. Brandon Chambers stood in my driveway, illuminated by the streetlight, holding a baseball bat, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His truck was parked crooked at the curb driver's door, still hanging open. Even from the second floor, I could see the way he swayed. Drunk didn't begin to cover it. "This is my house." His voice carried through the October night, loud enough to wake the whole street, slurred, furious. "You stole it from me. Old man, you stole everything." He swung the bat. My mailbox, the one Catherine and I had installed in 1997, exploded into splinters. I unlocked my phone and started recording. Timestamp 2:16 a.m. Brandon staggered toward the flower pots on the porch, the ceramic ones we'd bought at the farmer's market last spring. The bat connected. Terracotta shards and dirt sprayed across the walkway. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket, a spray paint can. In the streetlight's glow, I watched him shake it and approach the garage door. He painted. I couldn't make out all the words from where I stood, but I didn't need to. The letters were big enough, crude enough that their meaning was clear even in the dark. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone is vandalizing my property. I'm at 42 Maple Drive. The suspect is Brandon Chambers. He's drunk and armed with a baseball bat. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Und dabei des Spouses ist fehlend. I'm inside with all doors locked. He's outside destroying my mailbox and spray painting my garage. Officers are on their way. Stay inside, stay on the line. Across the street, Karen Phillips's bedroom light snapped on. I saw her silhouette in the window phone to her ear. Good. Multiple witnesses, multiple calls. The more documentation, the better. Brandon had moved on from the spray paint. He'd found something else in his truck, a crowbar. At 2:20, he was at my front door trying to jam the crowbar into the gap between door and frame. The new deadbolt held. Tony Valdez had done good work. I opened the upstairs window 6 inches. Cool October air rushed in. "Brandon," I called down. My voice was steady, loud enough to carry but not shouting. "The police are coming. Leave now while you still can." He looked up, found me in the window. His face was red, sweating despite the cold twisted into something ugly. "You ruined my life." He pointed the crowbar at me like a weapon. "I'll ruin yours. You hear me, old man? I'll make you pay for this." Sirens, faint but getting closer. Brandon heard them too. The fury on his face shifted to panic. He dropped the crowbar and stumbled toward his truck, but he was too drunk to run in a straight line. his foot caught on the curb. He went down hard hands out to break the fall, and by the time he scrambled back up, red and blue lights were washing across the street. 2:26 a.m., two police cruisers coming in fast. Officer Reynolds and Officer Davis. Third time in a week they had been called to my address. Brandon was still trying to reach his truck when the cruiser lights hit him. He froze like an animal caught in headlights, then tried to keep moving. Made it 2 steps before Reynolds was out of the car, hand on his holster. Brandon Chambers. Stop right there, hands where I can see them. Brandon spun around, stumbled, caught himself on the hood of his truck. He deserved it. You don't understand, he kicked us out. That old bastard took everything and get on the ground now. You should be arresting him. He's the criminal. On the ground. Officer Davis was already moving around the side, handcuffs out. Brandon saw him coming and tried to bolt. Made it 3 feet before his legs gave out, and he went down again this time, not getting back up fast enough. Davis was on him, hands behind his back metal, clicking around wrists. You'll regret this. Brandon was still yelling, face pressed against my driveway, spit flying. You hear me, old man? You'll regret this. Reynolds approached the porch where I'd come outside, phone still in hand, video still recording. Mr. Coleman, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. He looked past me at the broken window, the destroyed mailbox, the spray-painted garage door. We need to photograph the damage for the report. I have video. I held up my phone. Started recording at 2:16. Got everything. Reynolds nodded slowly. That'll help. This is vandalism, criminal trespassing, public intoxication, and disturbing the peace. Given the restraining order petition you already have filed, this is going to add significant weight to your case. He'll be held for at least 48 hours, probably longer. Behind him, Davis was hauling Brandon to his feet and walking him to the cruiser. Brandon's legs barely worked. His face was scratched from the fall, and his shirt was torn. He looked nothing like the confident real estate agent who'd walked into my house 18 months ago. He looked pathetic. Mr. Coleman, Reynolds said quietly. This is escalation. You did the right thing calling us, staying inside, documenting everything. But men like this, when they start property damage, sometimes they move to, I know. I did know. 42 years covering crime taught you the patterns. That's why I want that restraining order. Good. We'll make sure the judge sees this video. Reynolds walked back to his cruiser. I stood on my porch and watched them drive away with Brandon in the back seat, still yelling through the glass, though I couldn't make out the words anymore. The street went quiet again. Karen Phillips's light was still on across the way. I waved to let her know I was okay. She waved back and pulled her curtains closed. That's when I saw it, half a block down, parked in the shadow between streetlights. Nicole's sedan, engine off, lights off. She'd been there the whole time, watching. She hadn't gotten out to stop him, hadn't called out to him, hadn't approached the police to explain or defend or apologize. She just watched. I stared at the car for a long moment. Couldn't see her through the windshield, too dark, too far, but I knew she was in there. Knew she'd seen everything. The car started. Headlights came on. She pulled away slowly, turned the corner, disappeared. At 3:15, I was alone again. I walked around the front yard, assessing. The living room window would need to be replaced again. The mailbox was kindling. The flower pots were beyond repair. The garage door would need professional cleaning, maybe repainting. Quantifiable damage. Fixable damage. The other kind, the kind that came from watching your daughter sit in a car while her husband destroyed your property and got arrested for it. That kind was harder to measure. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and started making a list of what needed repair. Because that's what you do. You document. You fix what can be fixed. And you hope the rest heals with time. I spent Saturday morning cleaning up the wreckage. Glass shards swept from the walkway, each piece catching the October sunlight like tiny accusations. Spray paint scrubbed from the garage door. It didn't all come off, but I got most of it. The words Brandon had written were still faintly visible if you knew where to look, ghosts of rage etched to the wood. The mailbox replaced with a temporary one from the hardware store, a cheap metal thing that cost $19 and felt like a monument to everything that had been destroyed. By noon, the physical evidence of Brandon's rampage was mostly gone. You'd have to know what to look for to see the scars. A neighbor passing by would see a normal house on a normal Saturday. They wouldn't see the places where broken glass had embedded itself in the concrete, wouldn't notice the faint chemical smell of paint remover still hanging in the air, wouldn't understand that every repaired surface was a reminder of how quickly violence could shatter normalcy. But the wounds, those were still there, fresh, deep, the kind that don't show up in photographs or police reports. I'd gone through the motions of restoration mechanically. Swept, scrubbed, replaced. My body knew what to do, even when my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere in a cheap apartment on Oak Street where my daughter was waking up next to the man who'd been arrested for vandalizing my home, wondering if she'd made him coffee, if she'd told him it would be okay, if she'd looked at the bruises on her own arms and convinced herself they were accidents. The work helped. Physical labor always did. It gave my hands something to do, while my brain processed the impossible reality that my daughter, my Nicole, who'd been valedictorian of her high school class, who'd worked 2 jobs to get through nursing school, who'd inherited her mother's sharp mind and kind heart, was choosing to stay with a man who'd threatened to ruin my life at 2 a.m. while drunk and wielding a baseball bat. I'd raised her better than this. Catherine and I had taught her about self-respect, about recognizing red flags, about never accepting abuse from anyone. We'd modeled a healthy relationship for 38 years. Where had we gone wrong? What lesson had she missed? What part of her upbringing had left her vulnerable to a man like Brandon Chambers? These questions circled my mind like vultures as I worked. No answers came. By 1 o'clock, I was standing in my driveway looking at the temporary mailbox and feeling older than I had in years. 67 had never felt like a significant number before. Just another year in the long accumulation of years. But standing there alone with my daughter choosing her abuser over her father, 67 felt ancient. Felt like I'd lived too long and learned too little. I went inside, made a sandwich I didn't want, sat at the kitchen table and pretended to read the newspaper. The words blurred together. Something about the economy, something about politics. Nothing that mattered compared to the fact that Nicole was in danger and I couldn't save her. At 3 o'clock my phone rang. Charles Norton. His voice carried the weight of bad news before he even spoke. I'd heard that tone before in newsrooms, when a source had backed out in courtrooms, when a witness had changed their story in hospital waiting rooms, when doctors had nothing good to tell you. It was the sound of a man who'd rather be making any other call. Frank. Charlie. What is it? A pause? The kind lawyers use when they're choosing words carefully. When they know what they're about to say will hurt, and they're trying to figure out how to make it hurt less. As if there were a gentle way to deliver a knife wound. I don't know how to tell you this. My hand tightened on the phone. Just tell me. Your daughter posted bail for him, this morning, $5,000. The words took a moment to process. Like my brain refused to accept them. At first insisted there must be some mistake, some misunderstanding. Then reality settled in, with the weight of something falling from a great height. I sat down. Didn't realize I'd been standing until my legs stopped working, and the kitchen chair was suddenly necessary. The room tilted slightly, then righted itself. She bailed him out. Yes, after what he did last night, the vandalism, the threats, the arrest. Yes. I stared at the coffee cup in front of me. It was Catherine's favorite, the one with the faded sunflowers she'd bought at a craft fair in Wisconsin in 2006. We'd driven up for a long weekend, stayed at a bed and breakfast near Lake Michigan, spent 2 days walking through art stalls and eating overpriced festival food. She'd seen this cup at a ceramics booth and fallen in love with it. Paid $35, which had seemed outrageous at the time. Now it was priceless. One of the few physical objects I had left that she'd touched, chosen, loved. I'd been using it every morning since she died. Couldn't explain why. Just felt right. Like starting each day with a small piece of her still present. Now I stared at those faded sunflowers and thought about Nicole. About the $5,000. About how she'd managed to scrape that together when they were living in a weekly rental, when she was working 12-hour nursing shifts, when Brandon was day drinking at 3 in the afternoon. I tried calling her. Wanted to warn her about the protective order we're filing about the charges he's facing. She didn't answer. She wouldn't. My voice sounded flat, defeated, not like my own. I'm sorry. Don't be. I picked up the coffee cup, set it down. The ceramic made a small sound against the table. Final. That's her choice. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. That's very mature of you. Mature. I almost laughed. The sound came out wrong somewhere between humor and something that hurt. Charlie, I'm 67 years old, and I just watched my daughter bail out the man who vandalized my house 12 hours ago. I don't feel mature. I feel like I'm losing her. You might be. Charles's honesty was one of the things I'd always valued about him. 40 years of friendship meant he didn't sugarcoat. For now, but frank people come back. Sometimes it takes hitting bottom, sometimes it takes seeing things clearly. Give her time. How much time does she have? The question came out sharper than I'd intended. Before he hurts her instead of my mailbox, Charles didn't answer that. Couldn't. We both knew there was no good answer. The statistics on domestic violence were clear. Things escalated. Men who destroyed property moved on to destroying people. It was a pattern I'd covered dozens of times during my journalism career. I knew how these stories ended. I just never thought I'd be living one. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes. Just sat. No phone, no book, no television. Just me and Catherine's coffee cup and the afternoon light slanting through the kitchen window. I thought about the $5,000 Nicole had somehow scraped together to free the man who'd gotten them kicked out of their home. $5,000. That was rent for months. That was groceries, utilities, gas money, breathing room. That was the difference between surviving and drowning when you were living paycheck to paycheck in a place like Oak Towers. And she'd given it to Brandon. Not to secure her own apartment, not to build a safety net, not to create an escape route. She'd given it to the man who'd put them in that situation in the first place. The man who'd stolen $47,000 from her father. The man who'd gotten drunk and violent and arrested. She'd chosen him again. The weight of it sat on my chest like something physical, like grief, but sharper. Because Catherine's death had been inevitable, unfair, but natural. Cancer doesn't ask permission. But this was choice. Nicole was choosing to stay in danger, choosing to defend her abuser, choosing loyalty to a man who was destroying her over safety with a father who'd only ever tried to protect her. At 3:30, I picked up my phone and did something I'd been avoiding since Monday night. I called my daughter. It rang once, twice, 3 times, 4, long enough that I started composing a voicemail in my head. Something about how I loved her, how I was worried how I'd always be here when she was ready. Something that wouldn't push her further away, but wouldn't pretend everything was fine, either. Then she answered. "What do you want?" 3 words. Her voice was cold, defensive. Nothing like the voice that used to call me at work just to say hi. Nothing like the voice that used to laugh at my bad jokes, that used to ask me to help her study for nursing school exams, that used to call me Dad, like it meant something. I took a breath, steadied myself. "Nicole, I want you to be safe. I want you to leave him and come home." "Home!" She laughed, sharp, bitter, a sound that cut. "You kicked me out, Dad. You threw our stuff on the porch and humiliated us in front of the entire neighborhood. I kicked him out. You chose to go with him. He's my husband. He stole $47,000 from me." I kept my voice level, factual, the way I'd interviewed hostile sources for 4 decades. He planned to put me in a nursing home to sell my house. He vandalized my property at 2 in the morning, drunk with a baseball bat. "Nicole, he's dangerous. He made mistakes." Her voice rose. I heard emotion breaking through the defensive wall. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone deserves a second chance. I closed my eyes, heard the script, recognized every word of it from 42 years of interviewing victims who defended their abusers. The rationalization, the minimization, the desperate need to believe that love could fix everything. And sweetheart, this isn't about second chances. This is about a pattern of behavior. Last night he was drunk and upset. She was crying now. I could hear it even though she was trying to hide it. "You ruined his life, Dad. You took everything from him. What did you expect?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. I'd ruined his life. I'd taken everything. As if Brandon's arrest was my fault. As if the consequences of his own actions were somehow my responsibility. I expected him not to destroy my property. I expected you to see who he really is. You don't understand him like I do. Her voice shook. He's just under pressure. The lawsuit, the money problems, all of it, you caused this. You started this. The money problems he created by forging my signature on credit cards, by stealing from me for 6 months. Wainby sigmistas. Silence. Then quieter. That's complicated. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Come talk to me. Just you, without him. Let's sit down and... I can't. Why not? Because he needs me. The words came out in a rush. Desperate. Final. We're going to be fine. We just need time to figure things out. Please, Dad. Please just... leave us alone. Nicole, I have to go. Wait. Click. She hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the screen where her name was still displayed. Nicole. The gap-toothed 5-year-old who'd believed I could fix anything. The the 38-year-old woman who just bailed out a man who threatened to ruin my life. He's just under pressure. That's complicated. You caused this. He needs me. Every sentence a red flag, every justification a warning sign that I'd seen 100 times in other people's stories and never thought I'd hear in my own daughter's voice. She was protecting him, defending him, taking responsibility for his crimes and his rage and his destruction. She was protecting her abuser, and there was nothing I could do about it. Tuesday night, 3 days since Nicole had hung up on me, 3 days of silence that felt like 3 years. I'd just settled into Catherine's armchair with a book something about World War II, ironically fitting for the war. I was losing with my own family when my phone lit up at 9:07. Nicole, mobile. My heart stopped before my hand could reach the phone. Nicole, Dad! Her voice was barely a whisper, shaking, terrified. Help me. Please. I was on my feet before she finished the sentence. The book hit the floor. Where are you? Stay on the line. I'm coming right now. In the background, I heard it. A voice. Male. Angry. The words were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Rage. The kind that doesn't listen to reason. We had a fight. About money. About you. He got so angry, Dad, and I couldn't. A sound. Something heavy hitting a wall. Not a person. Please God, not a person. Just impact. Violence looking for a target. I'm in the bathroom. Her voice cracked. The door's locked, but he's trying to... Nicole. Brandon's voice came through clear now, muffled by the bathroom door, but close enough that the phone caught it. Open this door. We're not done talking. I was already moving. Keys off the kitchen counter, wallet, phone pressed to my ear. Sweetheart, listen to me. What's the address? I need the address. 1247 Oak Street, apartment 3B. But Dad don't. He's so angry, I don't want you to... The sound of the door shaking, rattling in its frame, fists pounding. I'm 3 minutes away. Keep that door locked. Do you hear me? Keep it locked. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my car keys. Garage. I needed to get to the garage. Dad, her voice broke completely. He hurt me earlier tonight. Not bad, but I should have listened to you. You were right. You were right about everything. The words hit me harder than any punch could have. She'd known. Some part of her had known 3 days ago when she'd bailed him out, when she'd told me to leave them alone. She'd known, and she'd stayed anyway because that's what abuse does. It convinces you that maybe you're wrong, maybe it'll get better. Maybe if you just try harder. I'm backing out of the garage right now. I'm calling 911 the second we hang up. Just hold on. My truck roared to life. I threw it in reverse. I'm scared, Dad. I'm so scared. I know, baby, I know. But I'm coming. 2 minutes, that's all. Another sound through the phone, louder this time. The door shaking harder. Brandon's voice was incoherent now, just fury and volume words blending into rage. Then the sound that made my blood run cold. Wood, cracking. The door frame giving way under sustained assault. Oh no, oh God, he's Dad, he's... Nicole, keep the door closed, I'm almost. A scream, short, sharp, cut off mid-breath. No, please don't. The line went dead. 9:09 p.m. I was already on Oak Street running every red light between my house and hers. My other hand was dialing 911. The phone rang once, twice. 911, what's your emergency? My daughter Nicole Coleman, she's at 1247 Oak Street, apartment 3B. Her husband is breaking into the bathroom where she's hiding. I just heard the door break. She screamed and the call cut off. I'm 2 blocks away. Sir, I'm dispatching officers now. Do not enter the residence. Wait for... I'm her father. I'm not waiting. I hung up. Threw the phone on the passenger seat. I slammed on the brakes, threw the truck into park, left it running, door open, keys still in the ignition. Before I tell you how this night unfolded, let me ask you something. Have you ever faced a moment like this in your own life when everything felt like it could fall apart in seconds? If so, share your thoughts in the comments so I know you're still here with me. And please note, the next part of this story includes certain fictionalized details, added for storytelling and educational purposes. If you don't wish to continue, you're welcome to stop the video at this point. 12 minutes became 10. 10 became 8. I took corners too fast, ran lights I shouldn't have, and I didn't care. Every second that passed was a second my daughter was locked in a bathroom with a man breaking down the door. Every red light I blew through was a gamble that could end in a crash, but the alternative arriving too late wasn't acceptable. The steering wheel felt slick under my palms. Sweat probably, though. I barely noticed. My entire world had narrowed to the road ahead, the phone on the passenger seat showing the GPS route to Oak Street, and the sound of my daughter's scream playing on loop in my memory. That short, sharp sound, cut off mid-breath, the way the line had gone dead. I'd covered crime for 42 years. I knew what that silence could mean. The truck's engine roared as I pushed it harder than I had in years. The speedometer climbed 40 in a 30 zone, 50 in a 40. Residential streets blurred past. Houses with their warm evening lights. Families inside having normal Tuesday nights, unaware that 3 blocks over a man was racing to save his daughter's life. 8 minutes became 6. A car honked as I cut across an intersection. I barely heard it. My focus was absolute. Oak Street, 1247, apartment 3B. Those details had burned themselves into my brain the moment Nicole had gasped them out between sobs. The phone on the passenger seat stayed dark. No callback. No text saying she was okay, that she'd escaped, that she'd locked herself in a closet or run to a neighbor. Just silence where her voice should have been. I thought about the last time I'd seen her, Saturday afternoon. The phone call where she'd defended Brandon, told me to leave them alone. Her voice had been cold, then distant. The voice of someone who'd built walls to protect herself from uncomfortable truths. Now those walls had come down. Now she called me, "Dad, help me, please." The most primal words a child can speak. The words that override everything else, pride, anger, hurt. Feelings, all of it, disappearing in the face of genuine terror. I pressed harder on the accelerator. 6 minutes became 4. The neighborhoods changed as I drove. The well-maintained homes of Maple Drive gave way to older construction. Yards got smaller. Paint jobs got shabbier. By the time I crossed 4th Street, I was in a part of town I usually avoided. Not dangerous exactly, just tired. The kind of place where people ended up when better options had run out. The kind of place where Nicole was living because her husband had stolen $47,000 and gotten them evicted from her father's house. My hands tightened on the wheel. Anger tried to surface at Brandon, at the situation, at myself, for not stopping this sooner, but I pushed it down. Anger was useless right now. Anger wouldn't get me there faster. Anger wouldn't keep Nicole safe. 4 minutes became 2. I could see Oak Street ahead now. The sign materialized in my headlights' battered metal, reflecting back at me. I took the turn fast enough that the tires squealed. The truck lurched, but held. The GPS announced I was 0.3 miles from my destination. 0.3 miles, less than a quarter mile. In another context, that would be nothing. A pleasant walk, a quick jog. Right now, it felt insurmountable, like the distance was actively fighting me, stretching itself out to keep me from reaching her. I ran another red light. No hesitation. If there had been cross traffic, I wouldn't have seen it in time. There wasn't. Luck or divine intervention, or just the late hour keeping the roads empty. I didn't care which. 2 minutes became 1. The buildings on Oak Street were exactly what I'd expected. Low-income housing, most of it built in the 70s and neglected since. Cracked facades. Windows covered with blankets instead of curtains. Chain-link fences around tiny yards filled with weeds and abandoned furniture. This was where people lived when they'd run out of choices. This was where my daughter, my Nicole, who'd graduated summa cum laude, who dedicated her life to helping others as a nurse, who deserved so much better than this, was being terrorized by the man who'd promised to love her. The address numbers ticked past. 1231, 1235, 1241. Then I saw it. 1247 Oak Street. At 9:19, I screeched to a halt in front of the building. The building loomed in the darkness, 4 stories of failing brick and flickering exterior lights. The kind of place where hope comes to get crushed under the weight of bad choices and worse circumstances. Several windows were dark. Others glowed with the blue flicker of televisions. One had aluminum foil covering the glass, probably trying to keep heat in, or light out, or both. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. I was out of the truck before the engine stopped running. Left it right there in the middle of the street door, hanging open, keys still in the ignition. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting to Nicole. I ran. The entrance had no security, no buzzer system, no locked door. Just a push, and you were in. The door swung open with a creak that suggested broken hinges and years of neglect. I registered it distantly, filed it away in some corner of my mind that was still functioning as a journalist. Unsafe building. No security measures. Vulnerable residents. None of that mattered right now. The hallway hit me with a wall of smell. Cigarette smoke, yes, but older than that. The smell of decades of cigarette smoke absorbed into walls and carpets and ceiling tiles. And underneath it, something else, desperation maybe, or just mold that had been growing since the 90s. The carpet under my feet was stained in patterns that suggested old water damage, old spills, old violence. Stairs. I took them two at a time. My lungs burned almost immediately. I'd let myself get old, I realized. 67 years of accumulated age hitting me all at once as I climbed. My legs screamed. My chest felt tight. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. But my daughter needed me, and nothing else mattered. First landing, keep going. Second landing, don't stop. 67 years old and climbing like I was 25, because somewhere up there behind a door, I couldn't see. Yet Nicole was in danger. Because I'd spent 3 days respecting her choice to stay with Brandon, giving her space to make her own decisions, and that patience had nearly gotten her killed. Third floor. The hallway stretched out before me. Dim lights that flickered intermittently, probably loose wiring. Doors that had seen better decades, most of them painted the same institutional beige that seemed designed to crush any remaining optimism. The carpet here was even worse than downstairs, worn through to the backing, in places stained beyond any possibility of cleaning. And at the far end, a woman standing outside apartment 3A, hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with the particular fear of someone who'd heard something terrible and couldn't stop hearing it. She saw me coming and stepped forward, mid-50s wearing a worn bathrobe that had probably been blue once but had faded to gray. Slippers, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Fear written across her face in lines that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd heard violence through these thin walls. Are you her father? I couldn't speak yet. My lungs were still catching up. I nodded. Yes. Thank God. Her voice shook. I heard terrible sounds, shouting, things breaking. She knocked on my door about 20 minutes ago, asked to borrow my phone, said hers was dead. I lent her my phone to make the call. She went back inside and I heard. She stopped, swallowed hard. Is she okay? 20 minutes ago. Nicole had been planning this, had known things were escalating, had prepared an escape route borrowed. A phone waited for the right moment to call for help. My daughter was a fighter. She'd been surviving this longer than I'd known. Call 911 again, I said, already moving past her. My voice came out rough, breathless. Tell them to hurry. I didn't wait to see if she complied. I was already at apartment 3B. The door was closed, but I could hear movement inside. Footsteps, heavy ones, Brandon's, and something else, something being dragged or pushed. Furniture maybe, or something worse. I pounded on the door with my fist, put my entire weight behind it. The hollow core door rattled in its frame. Nikolai Edstad opened the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence for 3 heartbeats that felt like 3 hours. Then the door opened. Brandon Chambers stood in the doorway. I'd seen him drunk before, seen him angry, seen him trying to maintain the facade of respectability while his world crumbled around him. But I'd never seen him like this. Hair wild and standing in every direction, like he'd been running his hands through it or pulling at it. Eyes bloodshot, the whites more red than white. Shirt half untucked buttons misaligned one side, hanging lower than the other. A scratch across his left cheek that was fresh enough to still be bleeding slightly. He was trying to arrange his face into something calm, something normal, but failing completely. The mask had cracked, and the thing underneath was showing through. Frank. He said my name like we were neighbors who'd run into each other at the grocery store, like we were friends catching up over a beer, casual, light, completely at odds with the chaos I could see behind him in the apartment. What are you doing here? The audacity of it took my breath away. What was I doing here? As if my presence required explanation. As if he couldn't imagine why a father might show up after his daughter called, screaming for help. Where is she? He didn't move, didn't step aside. Just stood there blocking the doorway with his body one hand on the frame like he owned the space, like he had the right to control who entered and who didn't. She's fine. We had a disagreement. Couples fight. This is between me and my wife. You should leave. Couples fight. The classic minimization. The phrase every abuser uses when they want to normalize violence. Couples fight. It's no big deal. It's private. It's none of your business. I looked past him into the apartment. It was a disaster. A lamp lay shattered on the floor near the kitchenette glass, and ceramic spread across cheap linoleum in a pattern that suggested it had been thrown with force. A chair was overturned, one leg broken clean off. Pictures that had probably hung on the walls lay on the floor frames cracked. A coffee table pushed against the wall at an angle like someone had stumbled into it or been shoved against it. And in the corner, next to what must have been the bathroom, my daughter sat on the floor, knees pulled up to her chest, face hidden in her arms, shoulders shaking with sobs she was trying to muffle. Her hair hung loose and tangled. One sleeve of her shirt was torn. And even from the doorway, even with her face hidden, I could see the way she was curled in on herself, making herself small, trying to disappear. Nicole. She looked up. Her face was tear-streaked, red, swollen from crying hard enough to cause broken capillaries under her eyes. And in her eyes, God, in her eyes, I saw the kind of fear that no daughter should ever have to feel. The kind that comes not from monsters or strangers, but from someone who'd promised to love and protect her. The worst kind of betrayal. Sweetheart, come here. Come to Dad. She started to move, started to unfold herself from that protective ball, started to stand on legs that shook visibly even from where I stood. Brandon stepped to the side, blocking her path and mine in one smooth movement. She's not going anywhere. This is my house. You're trespassing Frank. You need to leave before I call the police. Something cold settled into my chest. Not anger, colder than that. The kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. The kind of clarity that arrives when every other emotion burns away and you're left with pure purpose. You have 5 seconds to step aside. Or what, old man? He smiled, actually smiled. You gonna hit me? You're 67 years old. You really think? I pushed past him. Not a punch, not a shove that would send him flying. Just forward momentum. The kind that says you are not stopping me without words. The kind that comes from being a father who's just seen his daughter cowering in a corner. He grabbed my arm, tried to pull me back. His fingers dug into my bicep hard enough to leave bruises I'd find tomorrow. For a second, we were locked there in the doorway, him trying to assert control me, trying to reach my daughter. 2 men fighting over a threshold, over access, over power. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing. It makes 67-year-old muscles remember what they used to be capable of. I broke his grip and stepped into the apartment, felt something pop in my shoulder would hurt. Later didn't matter now, and pushed through. Don't touch me. Behind us, I heard it. Sirens. Close and getting closer. The woman from apartment 3A had made the call. Help was coming. But I was already here. 4 months later, my house sounds different. Not the suffocating silence of endurance that had marked those 18 months when Brandon and Nicole lived here. Not the noise of conflict that had defined those final terrible days in October. It echoes with something I hadn't heard in years: genuine laughter. The kind that comes from people who understand each other's pain and have chosen to heal together. Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock. My living room holds 12 people in borrowed chairs that I've collected over the weeks, some from my own basement, others donated by neighbors who understand what we're building here. We're sharing coffee from Catherine's old percolator and stories that would break most people's hearts, but not ours. We've already been broken. Now, we're learning how to put the pieces back together. Barbara Peterson sits near the window, her silver hair catching the February sunlight. Arthur Coleman has taken his usual spot by the bookshelf. Evelyn Baker, whose son embezzled her retirement savings, holds a tissue but isn't crying today. Harold Jackson, who discovered his daughter-in-law, had been forging his signature for 3 years, contributes his story with the measured calm of someone who's done the work of processing trauma. 7 others whose courage I witness every week fill the remaining chairs, forming a circle of survival. We call it the Wednesday Support Group, though the name feels inadequate for what actually happens here. This is more than support. It's recognition. It's validation. It's a room full of people who understand that elder abuse isn't always physical, that family can be the most dangerous predator, that admitting you've been victimized by someone you love is one of the hardest things a person can do. Today we're discussing early warning signs of financial abuse, the small things that seem innocent when they're happening. Someone offering to help with bills because you're getting older and might make mistakes. Someone getting defensive or angry when you ask questions about financial statements. Someone isolating you from other family members who might notice irregularities. Someone making you feel guilty for not trusting them with access to your accounts. The signs I missed with Brandon. The red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe my daughter had married a good man. Because questioning him felt like betraying her. The hardest part, Evelyn says her voice steady despite the weight of what she's sharing, was admitting my own son would steal from me. Your mind doesn't want to go there. You make excuses. You rationalize. You tell yourself there must be some explanation. Because if you admit the truth, you have to admit that someone you raised someone you love sees you as nothing more than a bank account to drain. Heads nod around the circle. We all understand. Every person in this room has faced that moment of terrible clarity when the excuses stopped working and the truth became unavoidable. That's why we're here, not to judge each other, not to say I told you so, but to bear witness to each other's survival. At 4:30, the meeting ends. People gather their coats, exchange hugs, promise to see each other next Wednesday. The house fills with the sounds of departure, car doors closing engines, starting voices calling goodbye. Barbara stops by my chair as the others filter out. "Frank, you've turned your pain into purpose." She squeezes my shoulder gently. "What you're doing here, it matters. You're helping people who have nowhere else to go, no one else who understands." We all do that, Barb. I stand my knees protesting less than they did 4 months ago. Movement and purpose have been better medicine than I expected. That's what community means. We hold each other up. The house empties. The quiet now isn't lonely. It's peaceful. There's a difference I never understood before, the difference between being alone and being at peace with solitude. For 18 months I was surrounded by people and desperately lonely. Now I'm often by myself and rarely feel alone. 4 months. Let me tell you what that means in the language of healing, in the vocabulary of rebuilding a life that was nearly destroyed. October 29th, 2025. I pulled Nicole from that apartment at 1247 Oak Street. Officer Reynolds arrested Brandon for domestic violence assault and violation of a restraining order. She sat in my truck on the drive home and said 5 words that I'd been waiting months to hear. "You were right about everything." She stayed in her old room that first night while I listened from downstairs, checking every hour to make sure she was safe, making sure she was real, making sure this wasn't some dream I'd wake up from. November brought therapy. Dr. Margaret Sanders, a specialist in domestic violence recovery, twice weekly for Nicole. I attended family sessions when Dr. Sanders recommended it, learned what I already knew intellectually, but needed to hear from a professional. Victims don't stay because they're stupid or weak. They stay because abusers are experts at manipulation, at making their victims believe they're the problem, that they're the ones who need to change. Brandon tried calling from county jail. Charles Norton got a permanent restraining order that carried criminal penalties if violated. December brought legal resolution. Brandon took a plea deal rather than face trial. 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation after release. Mandatory counseling that he'd probably ignore, but was required to attend. The lawyer handling his case must have explained that video evidence of vandalism audio recordings of him breaking into a locked bathroom, police testimony from 3 separate incidents, and my documentation of fraud meant he'd lose spectacularly at trial. When Charles called with the news, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just tired, just ready for it to be over. January brought freedom. Nicole filed for divorce. January 15th, 2026. It was finalized. She came over that night, sat at my kitchen table. Catherine's table, the one we'd refinished together in 1999, and cried. Not from sadness, from relief. "I should have left sooner," she said, her voice carrying the weight of regret. I took her hands, felt how much steadier they were than they'd been in October. "You're out. That's what matters." "You survived." February brought independence. She found an apartment on the west side near the hospital where she works. A safe building with good lighting, secure entry neighbors who look out for each other. When she showed me pictures before signing the lease, she was simultaneously proud and nervous. "You sure you don't want to stay here longer?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to offer. "I need to prove I can live alone," she said. "That I'm not the person I was with him. That I can make good decisions and take care of myself." She moved out last week. We both cried, but they were good tears, the kind that come from growth rather than loss. Now she visits twice weekly, Tuesday dinners and Sunday brunches. The rhythm of it feels natural, healthy. Not the forced proximity of living together. Not the painful distance of those months when she'd chosen Brandon. Just a father and daughter rebuilding their relationship on terms that work for both of them. At 5 o'clock, right on schedule, my doorbell rings. I open it to find Nicole standing there, holding bags from Golden Dragon, the Chinese restaurant Catherine and I used to order from every Friday. She's grinning, her face fuller than it was in October, the shadows under her eyes finally fading. "Thought you'd be hungry after the meeting." We eat at the kitchen table. Kung Pao chicken for her, extra spicy, the way she's always liked it. Beef with broccoli for me, the same order I've been getting for 30 years. The conversation flows easily. Stories from her shifts at the hospital, Updates on the continuing education class. She's taking questions about how today's support group went. Normal conversation. The kind families have when they're not walking on eggshells, not managing a crisis, just living. Then she sets down her chopsticks, her expression shifting to something more serious. Dad, I'm sorry for not believing you, for choosing him, for bailing him out after he vandalized your house, for all of it. I reach across the table and take her hand. Nicole, you survived. You're healing. That's everything that matters. But I hurt you. And you called me when you needed help. When your life was in danger, you knew I'd come. That's what I'll remember. Not the months you chose him, the moment you chose yourself. She sobs then, but they're healing tears. The kind that wash away shame and replace it with acceptance. At 6:30, she hugs me at the door. A real hug, not the brief, obligatory kind from the Brandon months. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. That's what fathers do, sweetheart. I watch her taillights disappear down Maple Drive, then go back inside my quiet, peaceful house. I sit in Catherine's armchair, the leather finally molding to my shape after 5 years of use. The new TV hangs where the old one was, though I barely watch it. The photos on the mantle have changed. Catherine is still there forever, 45, and smiling in that picture from our anniversary trip. But now there's a support group photo from our Christmas gathering. A recent picture of Nicole actually smiling with her eyes instead of just her mouth. Evidence of a life rebuilt from rubble. I open the side table drawer and pull out the small box. Inside, coiled carefully like a sacred relic, is the black cable. The one Brandon cut that Friday afternoon in October, the afternoon that changed everything. I hold it in my hand, study it like an artifact from an archaeological dig. That cable was an ending and a beginning. I say to the empty room, to Catherine's photo watching from the mantle. An ending of who I was, the man who let people take advantage, who chose peace over dignity. And a beginning of who I needed to become, someone who stands up, who fights back, who survives. I put it back in the box, back in the drawer. I don't need to look at it every day, but I need to know it's there. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments become the catalyst for the best changes. The clock reads 7:15, Wednesday night. The house is quiet, but not empty. Full of memories, painful and joyful, all necessary, all part of the story that brought me here. I pick up my book, still reading about World War II, still fighting those old battles even if they're just on the page now. And I smile, because my house doesn't sound like a war zone anymore. It sounds like home. And to you listening to this family story, remember this faith isn't just about prayer, it's about action, guided by divine strength. 3 times I turned to God in my darkest moments. The first time was when Nicole chose Brandon over me, when I sat alone in my living room holding that severed cable and asked for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to let go. The second time was during that desperate drive to Oak Street, when I prayed not for revenge, but for the strength to reach my daughter in time. The third time was when she finally came home safe, when I thanked him not for the easy resolution I'd wanted, but for the difficult path that led to genuine healing. Each time the answer came, not by removing the trial, but by giving me what I needed to walk through it with courage and clarity. This family story taught me lessons I wish I'd learned earlier, truths that cost me 18 months of dignity and nearly cost my daughter her life. Sometimes love means letting go, even when it shatters your heart into pieces you're not sure you can reassemble. Sometimes protecting someone means becoming the villain in their story until they can finally see past the lies they've been told. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is step back and let their child face consequences, trusting that pain will teach what words never could. Don't be like me. Don't wait until a black cable hits your floor to realize you've lost yourself in your own home. I ignored the warning signs for months, Brandon's comments about my age, his helpful interference with my mail, his subtle ways of making me feel like a guest in my own house. I told myself I was being oversensitive, that I was imagining things, that keeping peace was more important than maintaining boundaries. Each compromise felt small in the moment. Together they nearly destroyed me. Don't be silent when your dignity is being stolen piece by piece. I know the excuses intimately because I made them all. He's family. It's not that bad. I don't want to cause problems. Maybe I'm overreacting. These are the lies we tell ourselves when admitting the reality feels too painful, too shameful, too devastating. But silence doesn't keep the peace. It just lets the predator operate without resistance. Looking back at this family betrayal, I see the moments where I could have acted differently. When Brandon first suggested helping with my finances, I should have said no. When I caught him going through my mail, I should have confronted him immediately instead of letting him laugh it off. When Nicole started defending his disrespect, I should have had a harder conversation about what was happening instead of swallowing my hurt to keep her close. But regret is a luxury that changes nothing. I can't reclaim those 18 months. I can only use what they taught me to help others avoid the same mistakes. My response to this family betrayal wasn't about anger, though heaven knows I had plenty of that. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense, making Brandon suffer, because he'd made me suffer. It was about survival, about reclaiming the life he was systematically stealing, about teaching my daughter through action rather than words that she deserved better than abuse. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That dignity isn't negotiable even when the person taking it from you shares your last name. The concept of dad revenge sounds petty when you first hear it, like something from a television drama. But the most meaningful form of paternal protection isn't vengeance, it's modeling boundaries. It's showing your children what self-respect looks like in practice, not just in theory. When I changed those locks, when I documented the evidence, when I called the police, I wasn't just defending myself. I was teaching Nicole a lesson she'd failed to learn, that love should never require you to accept abuse. That marriage vows don't include permission to destroy your partner. That leaving isn't failure, staying in danger is. What I've learned through this family betrayal is that healing isn't linear. Some days Nicole and I laugh over Chinese takeout like nothing ever happened. Other days she'll see something that reminds her of Brandon, a similar truck, a certain cologne, even just an aggressive tone of voice, and she'll shut down completely. The trauma doesn't disappear just because the abuser is gone. It lives in your body, in your reflexes, in the way you flinch at raised voices or check locks 3 times before bed. Recovery is patient work, the kind that requires grace for yourself and the people you love. I've also learned that strength isn't what I thought it was. For years, I believed strength meant enduring, accepting, not making waves. I thought being the bigger person meant swallowing disrespect to maintain family harmony. That's not strength that's surrender dressed up in noble language. Real strength is saying, "This stops now," when every instinct tells you to stay quiet. Real strength is choosing your own well-being even when others call you selfish. Real strength is loving someone enough to let them be angry with you while you protect them from themselves. Here's what I wish someone had told me 67 years ago. What I'm telling you now. If you see yourself in this family story, whether you're the one being controlled or watching someone you love suffer, speak up. Document everything. Keep records of financial transactions, save text messages, write down dates and details of concerning incidents. Evidence matters when everyone else wants to minimize what's happening. Reach out to someone you trust, whether that's a friend, a lawyer, a support group, or a crisis helpline. Isolation is the abuser's best weapon. Connection is yours. It's never too late to act. I was 67 when I finally stood up to Brandon, when I reclaimed my home and my dignity. 67 years old and learning lessons about boundaries and self-worth that I should have mastered decades earlier. But age wasn't the obstacle, fear was. Fear of losing Nicole. Fear of being alone. Fear of admitting I'd been victimized by my own son-in-law. Once I pushed past that fear and chose survival over comfort, everything changed. And you're never alone, even when it feels like the whole world has sided against you. There are people who understand, who've walked similar paths, who can offer guidance and support without judgment. The Wednesday support group that meets in my living room exists because 12 people decided that shared experience matters, that bearing witness to each other's survival creates something powerful. We're not special. We're just ordinary people who refuse to let betrayal be the final word in our stories. The most important thing I can tell you is this. Your instincts are probably right. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. Don't let anyone convince you that you're too sensitive, too suspicious, too demanding. Don't let anyone make you question your own perception of reality. That's called gaslighting, and it's one of the most insidious forms of abuse because it makes you doubt the one thing you should always be able to count on yourself. If this story moved you, if you've experienced something similar, or if you recognize these patterns in someone you care about, please leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts. Your experience matters. Your perspective adds to the collective wisdom we're building here. Hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss our next story, because we're creating a library of survival, a collection of voices saying, "You're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're not helpless." Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the right words at the right moment can change everything. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Your time is valuable, and you chose to spend it listening to an old man talk about the worst and best months of his life. That means something. Your attention, your willingness to engage with difficult topics, your openness to learning from someone else's pain. These things create the foundation for genuine change, meaningful community, and lasting hope. One important note before we part. The stories you'll hear on this channel may include fictionalized elements crafted thoughtfully for educational and illustrative purposes. If this type of content doesn't resonate with you, please feel free to explore other videos that better match your preferences. We honor and respect every viewer's right to choose what they consume. Until next time, stand strong in your boundaries, speak your experience without shame, and remember that surviving difficult family situations doesn't make you weak. It makes you a warrior. You are never ever alone in this fight.